Okay, we are dropping right into the heart of a major legal proceeding today. It's day 20, actually, of the U.S. versus Shawn Diddy Combs trial. Things have really reached a pivotal moment.
Absolutely pivotal. And you, our listener, you've shared a whole stack of sources with us, reports, articles, notes, covering all the latest twists and turns.
Yeah, exactly. So our mission, like always with these deep dives, is to take all that source material you sent and really unpack. We want to get into the key insights, the legal strategies happening, behind the scenes.
And the testimony itself, some really compelling, sometimes very difficult testimony that came out on this critical day. We're here to guide you through what really matters from day 20.
For sure. So welcome to day 20 of the trial. Our focus today is squarely on the big events, the revelations, especially that witness testimony and the intense legal arguments back and forth.
And just before we dive deep, a quick reminder.
Yeah.
The federal case, U.S. versus Shawn Diddy Combs, it's still ongoing.
Right. Very important.
And like with any legal proceeding, everyone mentioned is presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Also, this case involves some highly sensitive information, so please just be aware if you're easily triggered.
Okay, good reminder. So let's set the stage. We need to understand day 19 to really grasp what happened on day 20. Right?
Definitely. Day 19 basically wrapped up with the prosecution's key witness, Jane Doe, finishing her direct testimony. It was, well, it was powerful, definitely challenging stuff.
And it really set things up for the defense's cross-examination, didn't it?
Absolutely. Her testimony wasn't just her story either. The prosecution backed it up with evidence, screenshots, text messages, even audio recordings. They were trying to build a picture, corroborate her claims about the dynamic.
And those claims from day 19, detail in the sources, were incredibly intense. She talked about psychological manipulation.
Yeah, specific examples like guilt tripping, gaslighting, what was described as a really graphic kind of psychological manipulation she alleged she used.
And a central part was the alleged pressure, right? Pressure for acts involving intercourse with other men while he watched.
Yes, exactly. And she claimed there were threats tied to that, threats to her livelihood, her financial situation, if she didn't comply.
She also described a specific alleged physical incident, June 2024, I think.
That's the one. The sources recounted her alleging he kicked down doors, put her in a CHE hole, punched her in the head, dragged her by her hair. Really stark descriptions of alleged physical violence.
And then, immediately after that alleged incident?
Chillingly, yeah. She claims she was then forced to perform acts involving intercourse again, allegedly in front of him. And she added details like him paying cash to the entertainer involved and even paying for the door repair.
But what makes it so complex, and something the defense definitely jumped on later, was the emotional side she described. Despite all these horrific allegations.
She kept going back. She testified she missed him, felt emotionally tied, even flew to see him after breaks. It wasn't a simple story of just leaving.
No, not at all. And the source mentioned the claim about him offering her an illegal substance pill, ecstasy.
Right, allegedly ecstasy, and that the cycle of alleged manipulation and abuse continued, sometimes involving these illegal substances.
There was also that strange financial part, where he allegedly told her to charge him to move on emotionally.
Yeah, like name her price. But then later, when she actually did seek compensation, the sources mentioned hundreds of thousands of dollars for the emotional toll over 3 years.
He accused her of being a con artist.
That's what she alleged. A complete turnaround, according to her testimony.
And then the video extortion attempt involving Sly, the $10,000 threat.
Right. This allegedly happened after the Homeland Security raids. She testified that when she told Mr. Combs, he cried and immediately told his lawyers to handle it legally, suggesting he was aware and concerned.
And that detail about him still paying for her lawyer, even now.
Yeah, as she's processing the trauma, seeing a therapist, it really underlines the ongoing complexity, the potential dependency the defense might explore.
When asked why she didn't tell anyone sooner, what was her explanation?
She described it as a dark, shameful secret she carried alone. She felt she couldn't tell anyone except, ironically, the man she alleged caused it all. That's where her direct testimony ended on day 19.
So setting the stage perfectly for day 20, but before the jury even came back. Lots happening legally, right? Motions flying.
Oh yeah, big time. The defense filed what's called an additional request to charge. Think of it like their wish list for the judge's final instructions to the jury.
Instructions on how to interpret the law and the evidence?
Exactly. It's strategic. They want the judge to guide the jury's thinking, focus them on specific legal points, potential doubts.
Okay, let's break down some key parts of that request. First, immunized witnesses.
Right. These are witnesses promise they won't be prosecuted for certain things if they testify truthfully. The defense wants the judge to warn the jury, be extra careful with their testimony.
Why? Because they might have a reason to lie.
That's the defense's implication. They might tailor testimony to protect themselves, please the prosecution. It's about casting doubt on credibility. Standard tactic, but important here.
What about the lack of investigative techniques point?
Another way to sow doubt. The defense wants the jury told they can consider if the government didn't use certain methods like surveillance, wiretaps.
But the government isn't required to use everything.
Correct. The instruction clarifies that. But it lets the defense subtly suggest maybe the investigation wasn't as thorough as it could have been.
And the evidence from searches, like phones.
They want the judge to confirm it was all obtained legally. To stop jurors from dismissing evidence just because they don't like how searches happen reinforces its validity.
Then the big one, the defendant testifying or not testifying.
Absolutely crucial. If Mr. Combs does testify, treat him like any other witness, no assumptions. If he doesn't testify, which is his constitutional right.
The jury absolutely cannot hold that against him.
Exactly. The instruction must state that. The burden of proof is always on the government. Silence cannot imply guilt.
They also mention voluntary intoxication, referencing illegal substances.
Directly tied to the allegations involving illegal substances. The defense wants the jury to consider. If he was impaired, could he even form the specific criminal intent needed for certain charges?
So being under the influence could potentially negate an element of the crime.
Potentially, yes.
Right.
For some specific charges, it could be a defense if the impairment was severe enough.
And bulk cash, just having money isn't a crime.
Right. They want to head off any assumption that large cash amounts automatically mean illegal activity. Important if financial evidence comes up.
Morality versus legality, a classic instruction.
Reminding the jury their job is to apply the law, not make moral judgments. Convict only if every legal element is proven beyond a reasonable doubt, regardless of whether they find the alleged actions distasteful.
And finally, the RICO statute of limitations.
Very critical for the racketeering charge. The government has to prove active participation after September 12, 2019. If the jury thinks he stopped before then.
They have to find him not guilty on that specific count.
Precisely. It puts a strict timeline on that major charge.
So, looking at this whole request, it's a defense strategy laid bare.
Absolutely. It's about raising doubt, focusing the jury on legal technicalities, challenging credibility, reminding them of the defendant's rights, and pushing back against emotional responses or assumptions. Pure legal strategy.
Okay, another big pre-jury item. The defense arguing against recalling Dr. Dawn Hughes.
Right, the trauma expert. She'd testified earlier for the prosecution about trauma bonds, why victims might stay, that kind of thing. Provided context for Jane Doe's behavior.
And the defense did not want her back on the stand. Why?
Several reasons. They said she'd already covered everything. They argued it was unfair because they cross-examined her thinking she was done.
And it looked bad.
Yeah, they argued it could look like special treatment, making her seem extra important or credible to the jury. Could confuse things, violate earlier rulings, maybe even suggest the court favored the prosecution. They strongly urged the judge to say no.
Then there was the fight over Jane's handwritten notes. Should they stay in evidence?
Yes. The prosecution argued forcefully for keeping them. They stated Jane wrote them, and the notes allegedly detail how Mr. Combs manipulated her emotionally promises of love, quality time, to get her to agree to the hotel nights.
And the legal reason for keeping them.
The prosecution claims they show her state of mind at the time. Crucially, they argue it supports their theory that he used fraud, this emotional manipulation, as a method of sex trafficking. Deceiving her, not just physically coercing her.
So the notes are evidence of that alleged fraud.
That's the prosecution's argument. The defense is challenging them, maybe saying they're unreliable or prejudicial, but the government sees them as vital evidence.
And then this detail about a seized phone. An old phone.
Yeah, apparently an old phone of Mr. Combs, thought lost, was found after his arrest in June 2024, and investigators found texts related to it.
Texts that sounded pretty significant.
Seemingly, yes. Texts between him and a staff member about finding it, including a voice note from him saying finding it could be a breakthrough, and that he hadn't deleted anything.
Followed by urgent messages asking for his lawyer's number.
911, important. Asking for the number, yes.
And the defense is fighting to keep these out.
Claiming attorney-client privilege. They argue that once he asked for the lawyer's number, the conversation about the phone became legally protected.
But the prosecution sees it differently.
They argue it was just logistical talk, finding a phone, getting a number, not legal advice. They believe asking for a lawyer's number doesn't automatically shield everything around it. They want the jury to hear it, likely thinking it suggests consciousness of guilt.
Wow. Okay, so with all that argued, Judge Subramanian had some key rulings before the jury came in.
First, Dr. Hughes, the trauma expert. The judge sided with the defense. She ruled the government cannot recall her. Big win for the defense there.
But Jane's handwritten notes.
The judge sided with the prosecution on that one. Ruled the notes are admissible. The jury will see them. That's potentially significant evidence for the SCEX trafficking charge based on fraud.
And there was some talk about a prior mistrial motion.
Yeah, defense attorney Shapiro brought up an earlier motion regarding a witness named Miss Bongolan, alleged perjury, or maybe a government error on timing. The judge mused it might have been a government mistake, not perjury. Shapiro also clarified it was only their second mistrial motion, not the third as previously stated, just procedural points.
And a juror was removed, juror 6.
Yes, stricken from the jury. The defense objected. The specific reason was sealed, kept private. But judges can remove jurors for potential bias, conflicts, even body language suggesting they can't be impartial. It slightly changes the jury mix.
Okay, so finally, after all that legal groundwork, the jury comes in, and day 20 really kicks off with the main event. Tina Jaros, the defense attorney, cross-examining Jane Doe.
Exactly. This is the defense's chance to challenge everything Jane said on direct, poke holes in the prosecution's story, and, importantly, present their alternative narrative. Suggest different motives, highlight inconsistencies.
Jaros started by establishing basics. They'd met before. Jane stopped meeting with the defense.
Her choice, yes. And confirming Jane was testifying against Mr. Combs. Then moved to her preparation.
How many prep sessions?
Jane estimated maybe 2 or 3 with the prosecution team, confirmed other prosecutors were involved, and crucially, confirmed she got immunity at the grand jury stage.
A point the defense surely wanted the jury to remember.
Absolutely. Ties right back to that requested instruction about evaluating immunized witnesses carefully.
Then Jaros dove right into the relationship dynamics, trying to paint a different picture.
Yeah, pointing out Jane expressed regret, but also chose to participate in that lifestyle for years. Highlighted Jane saying she did not want to break up with him.
Juxtaposing that with the abuse allegations.
Precisely. Jane confirmed having intercourse with other men for years, but resented the emotional control. Said she was hooked from the start.
And Jaros brought up Jane previously saying there was pleasure involved.
Yes, pleasure in performing acts her lover desired. Directly challenging the victim narrative, suggesting some level of personal involvement or enjoyment, at least sometimes. Jaros also noted Jane used the word partner repeatedly on direct.
How did Jane respond when asked directly why she had intercourse with these men?
She had difficulty answering that one directly. Mentioned she's in therapy now. When asked if she loved Mr. Combs, her response was careful. I love to spend time with my partner.
Jaros then listed things suggesting affection, cuddling, foot rubs.
Bathing him, watching his favorite show, Dine. Details presented to show a caring connection existing alongside the alleged exploitation.
What about exclusivity? Did Jane think she was the only one involved in hotel nights?
Jaros asked if she thought he wasn't doing this with others. Jane said no, she didn't believe that, confirmed she looked at his messages, but then clarified she believed she was the only woman involved in the hotel nights, specifically while they were together, and checked his phone to confirm that. A bit of a complex, maybe conflicting belief there.
And Jane's view on why they felt close during those nights?
She felt he was vulnerable. Sharing that vulnerability brought them together. She reiterated enjoying the lovemaking afterwards, just the two of them. And she testified he made her believe the hotel nights were something really special, unique to them.
Which speaks to the alleged manipulation.
Exactly. Making it feel significant, binding her to it, according to her testimony. But she also described the internal conflict, feeling loved because it was special to him, but breaking her own boundaries to make him feel loved.
Jaros asked about her presentation during these nights, trying to be sexy.
Jane confirmed. Yes, she tried to be sexy, felt she was sexy. Said her wardrobe was initially chosen by him, confirmed he liked baby oil, said it turned him on. Details suggesting willing participation in creating the atmosphere. Also established her age when it started, 35.
What about the fantasy talk examples?
The role-play cheating fantasy came up again. The detail about heel height, 6 to 7 inches versus her usual 3-4, showing adherence to specific fantasy details.
Then the questioning shifted to money, finances, logistics, flying weekly to Miami.
Jane said, sometimes. Jaros pointed out he still sent thousands, even after angry voice notes, suggesting a financial link separate from the emotional turmoil.
Why did Jane see him as larger than life?
Her answer wasn't just about fame. She said he introduced her to gospel music, a favorite TV pastor, things that stayed with her. A more personal reason for admiration.
The $20,000 investment in her dress line.
Jaros brought that up. Also, Jane joining OnlyFans. Jane said it was financial need. If I could get it off, I would, implying she'd stop if she could.
Jaros estimated the total money received, $150,000 over 3.5 years.
Jane said it sounded about close, but she hadn't counted. Added she usually didn't ask, suggesting it was freely given.
But Jaros pointed out Jane already had income when they met, Instagram, child support.
Jane countered the relationship, hindered her influencing career, claiming she only met maybe 10% of her earning potential then, reframing the support as necessary due to lost income opportunities.
Did Jane like that he was a provider?
She confirmed, "Yes, as a woman, I like that." Defense likely using this to suggest his financial capacity was part of the attraction, potentially framing it as transactional from her side, too.
The house she lived in came up too.
Jaros noted she called it our house, then my house. Jane confirmed privacy was key, keeping entertainers secret from staff, plus the yard for her son.
Moving into the new, nicer home in April 2023.
Jean explained she hoped they could have the hotel nights there, privately, if the house met his pace level. This could suggest investment in continuing the activity, just more privately. Confirmed they didn't want leaks and had done nights at her old apartment too.
And the payment for that new rented house.
Confirmed he paid $40,000 upfront deposit, first last month. Jaros highlighted the landlord had payment secured and suggested he might have offered 3 more months' rent during their breakup, implying ongoing support.
Did Jane think he'd stop paying rent?
She said yes. Sometimes she felt he would use it as kind of like a tool, a little reminder of his leverage. Confirmed a 2023 love contract where he agreed to $10K a month for rent. And crucially, confirmed he still pays her rent now.
Okay, let's switch gears to the illegal substance use. Jaros had a different take here.
Big time. Jaros directly suggested Jane chose to take ecstasy, the illegal substance, during a hotel night to feel uninhibited, play into the fantasy, framing it as her choice.
But Jane pushed back.
She did. Instead of my choice, I would say Mr. Combs would offer me the ecstasy and expect me to take it, reframing it as responding to alleged expectation and pressure, not free will.
Jaros also probed Jane's observations of his well-being.
Jane testified that early on, first Turks and Caicos trip, she suggested rehab in Thailand for him due to his illegal substance use. Described seeing physical signs on a flight, shaky hands, off-coloring. Could tell he wasn't taking very good care of himself.
Jaros suggested Jane knew he was an addict early on.
Jane described an evolution in her understanding. Initially, saw overdoing the partying. Later, a very strong pattern, but still didn't label him an addict then. Said, now I would say that, but then he was a really big party guy. Confirmed learning about his antidepressants later, wanting him off drugs, and him expressing interest in ketamine therapy.
Then the cross-examination really dove into the hotel nights themselves, her understanding.
Jaros asked about his motivation. Jane said his desire. Confirmed he used terms like voyeurism, fantasy.
But Jane did her own research, found a specific term.
Yes, cuck. She testified her research into his alleged obsession with freakoffs, intercourse with other men while he watched, led her to that term.
And she defined cuck in court.
Defined it as deriving pleasure, seeing his woman derive pleasure from other men. Added her research suggested some use their partners to explore repressed curiosity vicariously. The source noted, Combs leaned forward, looked intently at his lawyer during this definition.
Jaros brought up Jane, allegedly enjoying just about every minute with him during these nights.
Jane clarified, the portion of me and him, yes, I love that part. Confirmed they had alone time before and after the entertainer, and she enjoyed that part, the intimacy with him. Said she got the attention she wanted during those one-on-one moments.
What about the video recordings? Jaros suggested she put on a good show, knowing he'd watch.
Jane confirmed that. Admitted performing for the camera, knowing he'd view it.
But did she like watching them back with him?
No, she pushed back there. I did not like that part, she said clearly. But it was just part of the relationship. Distinguishing participation from enjoying the documentation.
Were there times she tried to stop a night or dismiss an entertainer?
She confirmed a few times he would end a night early if she vocalized wanting to stop. And rare occasions, he agreed to dismiss someone she wasn't comfortable with.
But a crucial qualification, she added.
Yes. She stressed this only happened after she'd already tried to have intercourse with the men for a while. Garros tried to spin it as him readily agreeing, but Jane insisted she had to endure interactions first. Undercuts the idea of easy consent or control for her.
Jaros revisited the crying incidents Jane had described.
One early on, crying when he was leaving. She asked him to stay. He rearranged plans. Defense could frame that as responsive.
And the other one? In the shower.
Middle of the relationship. Crying in the shower with him. Garros asked her to confirm he was allegedly high on ecstasy then. Jane confirmed he allegedly said he was too high to see her cry and told her, "You're going to ruin my high," linking alleged illegal substance use to his lack of response.
The texts with Christina Korm, his chief of staff, were read out too.
Jane had testified. Combs asked her to bring illegal substances, DRGs, to Miami, and that Korm told her on the phone it was fine, pack in the checked luggage.
But the text read in court didn't show Korm saying it was fine.
Correct, according to the source. The text didn't include that explicit instruction. Jane maintained the phone call happened, though. Jaros seemed to be trying to distance Korm, asking things like, "She's not asking you to do it here, right?" referring to the texts.
Questioning about Korm flying private, Jane wasn't sure.
Assumed so, but wasn't sure. Jane described her relationship with Korm as not close, felt Korm didn't like her, and believed Korm's opinions influenced how Combs treated her.
Focusing on Korm seems potentially linked to the RECO charges.
Very likely. Prosecutors need to show a network, that Combs worked with others. Korm has been mentioned a lot. If the government calls her or uses testimony about her, it could be to establish that conspiracy element. The defense is likely trying to weaken any link between Korm and illegal activity now.
Then the memorable trifecta nickname came up.
Yeah, used between Combs, Jane, and an escort named Paul. Jane confirmed Combs coined it.
And the basketball roles.
Right. Jane is Kobe Bryant, Paul is Shaquille O'Neal, and Combs assigned himself Jordan, leading to Jane's memorable retort. "But how you, Jordan, you ain't doing nothing but record now." Little pushback there.
Jaros seemed to use these details, like interactions with Paul, to suggest affection or consent, undermine essay claims.
That seemed the strategy, leaning into details suggesting positive interactions. But Jane's response about Paul was nuanced. "Given my circumstances, if I had to do what I had to do, at least there was somebody who had a warm energy." Acknowledging warmth, but still framing it as something she had to do. She did confirm finding one man handsome, having chemistry with another, details the defense wants the jury to hear.
What about the adult performer Sly, watching his videos together?
Jane confirmed they watched his Poe videos before reaching out. Jaros asked if Jane looked up Sly's profile on her own. Jane. With the encouragement of my partner.
Jaros asked if it was Jane's idea to message Sly privately.
Jane. Yes. Garros pressed. Did Combs ask or just encourage Jane? He was encouraging it. Texts were read showing Jane asking Sly for an explicit video, testified Combs prompted her, and Jane telling Sly, "I'll organize a visit," testified she was with Combs figuring it out. On the surface, looks like active participation from her.
After lunch, things got explicit, reading texts aloud.
Yes, sexually explicit texts between Jane, Combs, and adult film star Kay Babel. Both Garros and Jane read them. Similar tactic used with Cassie Ventura.
The source mentioned it was awkward.
Described Jaros reading explicit lines in a flat tone, having to explain emojis. A real disconnect between the content and the formal courtroom setting.
The goal for the defense being
To suggest Jane wanted these nights wasn't forced. Reading her own explicit, seemingly enthusiastic words challenges the coercion narrative directly. More texts from Novdon 2021 were read, Combs telling her to be explicit.
And Jane testified she used that graphic language knowing it's what they wanted, a performance.
That was her explanation, yes. Responding to perceived expectations. After fantasy messages, Combs asked what Jane wanted. She wrote, spend time with her favorite person, him. He then asked if she wanted him to stop by with an entertainer.
And she said yes. Why?
Her testimony. It was the only way she'd get to see him, the only option I was given. She agreed because she wanted to see her lover, Combs, framing acceptance as a choice driven by wanting connection, even if it meant unwanted sex activity.
Messages like, you can't handle no more.
Jane interpreted that as him teasing or taunting her into another encounter with someone else. Confirmed they had a hotel night after those messages.
Voice messages, too, about setting something up with Dawn and Sly.
Yes. Combs mentioned a last vision with them. Jane said a VM suggesting saving it as a grand finale after his album.
But her testimony revealed her real intention behind that VM.
She testified she was actually trying to make excuses to avoid setting it up, showing a potential difference between her outward communication and internal feelings.
Then conflict arose when she saw him with other women.
Right. After those audio messages, she saw social media posts of him with another woman. Led to frustrated texts from Jane why pressure her for a hotel night while whining and dining someone else.
She referenced him buying the other woman a Chanel bag.
Yes. That led to a very tense exchange with Garros. Jane said she didn't feel she got much materially, bothered others got gift strips, while she allegedly endured sex with strangers for him.
Jaros reminded her about the Van Cleef necklace, the Beta Veneta bag.
Jane confirmed getting them, then quipped to Jaros, "I'm sure you have one."
Jaros denied it, asked the bag's cost, leading to Jane's sharp response.
"How much does your body cost?" Judge had to step in, cautioned Jane. Jane then estimated Beta bags cost $1,500, $5,000. Didn't know Chanel cost. She requested a break right after that. Clearly an emotional moment.
After the break, they briefly covered her living situation, the business.
Confirmed current home is 5,300 Esquires versus 1,400 Sierra before. Said she profited a little bit from the $20 business investment. He never asked for proceeds.
Jaros tried to link that business to Jane, saying the relationship hurt her career.
Jane stuck to her point. Had I not dove head first in this relationship, I probably would have been a bit more successful. But that's neither here nor there. Maintain the relationship cost her professionally.
The day ended revisiting more explicit texts. Jane seeming positive about hotel nights after watching footage.
Yes. Texts where she offered to watch footage knowing he liked recaps. Messages where she said she didn't mind hotel nights after he suggested a night alone without entertainers. Or Molly, she wrote, "She'd believe it when I saw it."
And her explanation for those positive-sounding texts.
Providing positive reinforcement, she testified. So he felt comfortable, not rejected. Again, framing her communication as a strategy, not necessarily genuine enthusiasm. And that wrapped up her cross-examination for day 20. And just like that, court ended. Promptly at 3:00 p.m., set to resume the next day at 1:00 p.m.
Okay, so a really intense day, mostly that cross-examination. Let's try to process this. What does this all mean for you, the listener, trying to follow this complex case?
Well, it really throws the complexities into sharp relief, doesn't it? You saw the defense strategy play out, systematically challenging credibility, introducing alternative motives like money or choice, trying to reframe the whole relationship.
It wasn't presented as simple coercion by the defense. Definitely not.
No. And it highlights just how incredibly tough it must be for a witness to recount such personal, traumatic, and frankly contradictory seeming events under that kind of legal microscope. Every text, every past action, dissected.
Yeah, you see the struggle to convey nuance through that adversarial process.
Exactly, and understanding this process is key. The defense's job isn't necessarily to prove innocence right now, but to raise reasonable doubt. What you hear in cross-examination is filtered through their strategy. It's not always just objective truth.
It shows how hard it is to untangle things like motive, consent, control, especially in a long, complex relationship with alleged power dynamics and illegal substances involved.
Absolutely. It's messy, and the courtroom is trying to fit that mess into legal boxes.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into day 20, maybe the thing to reflect on is that tension. The tension between Jane Doe's narrative of trauma and coercion and the defense highlighting moments that look like choice or affection or financial motivation. How does hearing these deeply personal, sometimes conflicting details laid out in court challenge how we think about relationships, about choice, about accountability? What really stood out to you today?